Hi there, everybody. I hope everything's going well with you and you're doing well with this beginning of hopefully your summer. That depends on whether you're in the northern hemisphere, of course. So I hope it's going well for you. Today I've got a quote from George Bernard Shaw, which is, I don't know, I guess he made this about 100 years ago, but that's irrelevant. It's a long one, but let me go um, from the card. People are always blaming their circumstances for what they are. I don't believe in circumstances. The people who get on in the world are the people who get up and look at the circumstances they want. And if they can't find them, make them. Shaw was basically saying, as I read this, or as I interpret it, that circumstances are essentially malleable. Different people look at different things. I mean, if you think about it, I could pull up anything. Let me take a marker here. This is not a big deal, but just look at it from standpoint. So you see it from one side because you're looking at the camera from that way. I'm seeing it from the other side. Now, if there was somebody else in here, they were seeing it from this side. Somebody else would be seeing it from this side. So even though it's the same marker, it doesn't necessarily mean that everybody is seeing it in the same way. So they're going to be looking at it from a totally different circumstance, depending on, well, A, literally in the sense of where they're standing, and B, their perspectives on things. Obviously, those of you who are, say, 20 are going to look at something different than somebody who's 5. Those of you who might be 40 are going to look at something differently than somebody who's 20. So that you've got one single circumstance, one single, can I say, fact, one item that can be debated, negotiated, whatever, depending on the circumstance of what you're wanting to, not to use the word circumstance, but I did anyway, based on a lot of other things. And I think that where Shaw was coming from is that this is what happens with people who get to be successful. They need X, Y, and Z, and if they can't find it, they will figure out how to get there. Now, I'm sure that some of you are going to say, well, I can't change my circumstances because I'm X, Y, or Z. I think this somewhat depends on what you mean by changing the circumstances. One of the things I'm coming up with, or the things I'm thinking of rather at this moment, is something I've discussed before, of people who, one in particular, I can't remember his name. I'll have to go back and take a look at it, but I discussed this once before about somebody who liked mountain climbing. He ended up in an accident, lost his legs. The circumstances would have dictated that he would have been in a wheelchair and, never climbed a mountain again. He turned around and said, nope, I'm going to figure out how to do it. And he helped create or develop certain equipment so that it allowed him to climb mountains again. Now, that might be a little unknown for many of you, but I dare say that many of you have seen news clips on something on the evening news of a marathoner who's has a prosthesis, and they run during those things. Some of you may see things on your local news about people in your local community who have what other people would consider a massive problem, but yet they don't look at it that way. They just look at it a way as something to some little inconvenience to get around, to that they still have to do whatever it is they want to do. So that whereas that there are certain things that might get you to say, I can't overcome this, somebody else is not going to see it that way. So when you start recognizing the fact that that circumstance is really in the eye of the beholder, you can start to think in terms of, okay, if this is not as bad as I think it is there some way I can get around it? Or is there some way I can change the circumstance? And I keep using that word. Change the situation so that things are not as bad as I think they are. Once people start looking at things as with the idea that there's a way of accomplishing their goals or getting around the issues or some such thing like that, they tend to find things that are going to be much more negotiable and that they can work through the issues that they originally thought they couldn't work through. Somebody who might get a diagnosis of, I don't know, being diabetic or some such thing like that may look for other things to find what can be done to change that. We all have these different issues, I think, and the issue again goes back to mindset. How are you looking at that problem, and whether or not are you looking at it as something that it's immutable, that you can't do anything about, that it's just a wall in front of you? Or are you looking at it and saying, okay, it's there. Now, what can I do? Do I go around the wall? Do I dig a hole under the wall? Do I climb the wall and go over it? Do I hire a helicopter and fly over it? What are you going to do with that wall that you say is in front of you that's keeping you from going where you want to go? And it still boils down to basically how much are you willing to do to get around that issue. Now, again, and I've used this before, but you will hear me say this again. There's been some point in your life in which you got told you couldn't do something. You dug in your heels and said, "Oh yeah, I'll show you," and then proceeded to move heaven and earth to get that thing done. Is that not true? Now, you may have been 5 years old, maybe, might have been 15, but somewhere along the line, you've done something that somebody told you couldn't do, just simply to be able to show people that you could do it. And this is essentially what I'm talking about. So if you've done that at least once, you've got it in you. All humans have got it in them to do it at least once, to figure out how to get around whatever it is you say you can't get around. And if it is something that maybe for whatever reason you can't do, is there some way you can negotiate or rearrange or look at it differently and modify it ever so slightly? I mean, for example, I might wish that I was 10 years younger than I am right now, and there's nothing I can do about it. But can I do something to, say, alleviate any of the aches and pains that I've got now because of the age that go along with that? Or are there certain things that I can change to alleviate issues that might come because of my age? So yeah, there are going to be circumstances that you can't change. I mean, I can't suddenly decide I'm going to be 20 again or relive things that happened 10 years ago. That's not going to happen. But I can take a look at what my mind says and look at them differently so that what I thought maybe was a big problem a year ago may not be so big anymore. So again, it depends on how you look at it. Does this make sense? If you really stop to think about this, I'm sure you're going to think of certain circumstances in which you've seen things that you thought were miserable, and other people said, it's not such a problem. You can fix that. So it's, how are you going to change your mindset so that you look at it as something that you can correct and you can get around? What are you going to do with that wall in front of you? Are you going to go around it? Are you going to build a door? You're going to make a window? You're going to go under it? You're going to crawl over it? What are you going to do? So your challenge this week for me is to, identify a wall and see if you can figure out what you can do to get around the wall. Now, I'm not saying it's not going to happen in, 30 seconds, mind you, but if you start taking a look at it, you can get around that wall, or you can modify the wall or change something so it works out. And if you think you can't, let me know and let's see what happens. I wonder if I've got any comments that would disagree with you if you think that I'm wrong on something. So send me a reply and let me know, and let me give you a chance to give my 2 cents to see if we can work on a viewpoint that you can get to be much more doable about whatever it is that you think you can't do. So I hope this was helpful. Again, if you've got anybody that you want to share it with, please forward on to them, and I'll chat with you next week. Bye.